All right, traders, this is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day recap for Monday the 3rd. So today was a big gap up day. I'll bring up the S&P Futures first. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to do a super micro analysis of the S&P charts. If you listen to my videos, you know that I don't do that too much. Listen, I'll give you my viewpoint. I said this to somebody on Twitter earlier. I thought, there's some really interesting observations. If you're a regular member of Twitter, or you participate on Twitter, and you kind of notice, I put out a lot of things. I was tweeting out some of the headlines from the G20 meeting. And there's so much like there's a lot of malice. There's a lot of people who just are under the impression, oh, this market's going to go down. It's going to go down. There's no agreement. So there's a lot of people who are really negative, and then there's a lot of people who are really positive too. Like, oh, it's going to be a rip your face off rally this week, and I don't know if people are really thinking, which is, I'm fine. You could have either one of those viewpoints. You're allowed to do that. But I just think it's a little bit more realistically to just kind of take these days one at a time, especially after a big binary event that we had. And we could talk a little bit about the meeting. A lot of thoughts I think people had about good and bad. I think there's a lot of doubters about it, but really, if you listen to some of our videos last week, I think it wasn't that I was looking for a trade deal to be done, just that they were going to make progress. And it seems like there's a lot of people who are very skeptical. And I still am in the camp that it's going to take a little while. These things, it's a big thing. It's these trades. You're talking about, the two biggest countries ironing out a trade policy going forward. These things don't get done over dinner and a handshake. I do think it's a good sign that they're going to work on it. Hopefully they make progress. But it's a process. It is good progress, and it's a process for them to do that. So, of course, I think everybody wants to see something done right away. But if you remember, just a couple months ago, the two sides were barely even talking. So, I'm just in the camp of being realistic. And about that, so I would imagine it's going to linger and it's going to go back and forth. And unfortunately, we're going to have these trade headlines go back and forth if it stalls or if it gets a little bit closer. But this is a complicated process. So that said, S&P, we kind of went a little bit lower. On these gap days are so hard, right? So this is what I said. This is kind of the way I tackled today. I said the gap days are really tough. I've took profits on a lot of my trades. I really didn't go into this week way over the tips of my skis. I kind of, I did have some trades in place, but I wasn't going to take a huge amount of risk going into this weekend. I just didn't think that was a great way to do things. But I did have some trades where I took some profits right around the open. I had some Square on from last week. I had some FXI. I had just a tiny bit of BABA left. BABA was an interesting name. Right out of the open, there was put buyers that came into that, and a couple other of the China names. So some names worked pretty well, but these gap days, it's one of the reasons why I think, if you're not in the trading room, this is the things that we went over in the pre-market session this morning. I said for nothing but for the first 10 minutes. I said I'm going to be looking to take targets, take profits, and I even gave kind of a little bit of a game plan, and I said anything that I have on shorter dated options I want to get out of quickly. And of course you could have hedged those pre-market unless you were in spreads. A couple trades I was in some call spreads, but you always have that option available to you. I think it's one of the things that traders don't do very well. Some retail traders, they don't know how to hedge. I see this a lot of times on Twitter as well, where people that say that they're waiting for the open. You could hedge anytime you want to if you're outright long calls. Obviously not at night, but in the morning once it's 6 o'clock on, you have that ability, and then you don't have to sweat so much the open. But yeah, so for today was a big day for me to take profits on the positions that I had on, and then you kind of move on and take this day one from day, you take this one day at a time. And again, this video is for information purposes only. I'm not giving out any advice or anything like that. But that's, I think, really how you want to take a look at this, because it's very hard for this market on a big gap up day to keep on running. There's probably going to be a little bit of digestion. Remember, we've gotten here now 3 times here in the S&P, so there is some resistance. We are above the new value area for December, but you do have this resistance up here. Let's go ahead and look at Nasdaq Futures, or I always like to look at the Qs rather than Nasdaq Futures. But you know, you're going to see a little bit of a back off from the highs as well. This is so far a lower high than this is. But again, I'm not going to analyze this, super analyze this. We're back above the 50-day moving average. We're right at the 200-day moving average. And let's see. You know, my viewpoint again is I wouldn't be surprised if the major averages go ahead and move sideways, but we're going to pick out names, and we're going to pick out some sectors that you know, where the setup is a little bit better. So I'm not overly concerned about looking at every resistance and support line in the major indices, because I don't really trade the major indices other than holding them in my long-term accounts. You know, I trade single stocks. So IWM was a little bit shaky this morning. It actually finished up 1% today. It actually came all the way back. It was in the red today. So this IWM, if you're a day trader, has been giving you really good day trading, like volatility. If you don't want to trade the single stocks, I would say IWM. Look at IWM, came right into the top of value, and reversed. But so this was pretty good. A couple traders, I think, bought the lows in IWM today, and nice move back, up 1%. So you know, it's done this now a couple times, IWM, where it seems like, and I think people are looking at it, they're like, oh geez, the IWM is not participating. Remember, we saw this last Wednesday, and IWM shut up like a rocket, and that was here. So it seems like something's going on. I would keep an eye on this IWM while it's moving like this. Here was last Wednesday when this thing fell. It looked like it was falling apart, and the market started to possibly turn lower. And then we had the Powell speech and rocket ship. So this one still has more work to do. It does look like the weakest, you know, in terms of where it is below the 200-day moving average, but it is what it is. One of the exercises that so that's the major indices. EEM, you know, is now above the 50-day moving average. EM will always have gaps in it, by the way, even if it's not a big day like today, because most of the markets that are in emerging markets, EEM, are closed while we're open, right? So that's why you always see gaps, because a lot of times there's China, and China is not open while we are open. So you know, there's local securities in there in the EEM, but it did make progress today. It didn't close on the highs, but up 2%. I mentioned BABA a little bit today. I'm now out of BABA altogether. I did not like all the put buying that was going on in BABA right on the open, so I took my profits and moved on. This was a nice looking trade. You know, my whole game plan for BABA was for this to go up to the 200-day moving average. You know, it's fine. It's, you know, would it be interesting if it gets up there? Sure, and it could get up there, but I think from this point, you know, from where I got long into here, was a nice little trade. But I do think more of the emerging markets, they are looking interesting. ASHR is the Shanghai ETF. That's also above the 50-day moving average. So there's some exciting things going on here. And if you break apart the emerging markets, you'll find that I think that there's some opportunity. I'm still long some FXI. I did take a target in this one. I didn't want to completely get out of all the trades that I was in. One trade that did not work for me, I got to talk about the losers too, not just the winners, right? Was Hua. This thing, and they may have dumped some of the trade that they put on Friday, but this thing reversed big time. I didn't take any of this thing off. So I mentioned I took a lot of profits, but I did not have a huge trade on in Hua, but this thing right on the open fell apart pretty decently. So, you know, I mentioned call buying works sometimes, and I did have the ability, if I had a bigger position on, I would have been selling pre-market, you know, to take that, to take advantage of that. But, you know, I said, hey, let's see if this thing can turn the corner. It may not be done, you know, from the move that it had, but certainly, you know, I don't like the looks of something that opens on the highs and closes close to the lows. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about what sectors today. I put this together because I think you'll find this is pretty interesting. But this is percentage change from the open, right? So we, of course, we had a gap day today, so that makes it pretty difficult to analyze just percentage gains today. So I actually footed this to where these things opened. One of the only ones that had outperformance and closed on its highs was XLU, and I started a trade today in XLU. And I talked about the utilities last week, showing some nice technicals. You could look at what I tweeted out last week, but for now I'm long XLU because it looks like it looks like it's been wanting to go higher. So two big green bars in a row, and it closed on the highs today. That's your only sector that did that today. There's a couple others that closed. Again, this is from where it opened to where it closed. Looks like I got the robotics ETF in there. The gold miners, steel names hung in there all day today. They actually finished a little bit higher than the open. But if you look at the bottom of the list, the financials still are not performing. They closed lower than the open. The industrials closed lower than the open. The transports did the same. FANG stocks did the same. So it's, I think it's important. I think it's a good exercise to look at this. The Chinese internets, there was profit taking in there. They finished off the highs. So it was just the defensive utilities that did that. If we look at some single stocks, we'll start with Amazon. I'm looking at names now that actually hung in there. I want to see that relative strength. Amazon did fine today. Was up 82 points today, back above all short-term moving averages. Here was your buy signal last week if you use the moving averages. So real nice move in Amazon. We'll stick with the A's and we'll look at AMD. AMD had a really nice day. Good volume on AMD as well. Apple, I just wanted to look at this one. It actually hung in there. So, it looked, you could see from where it looked like today, right around 1 o'clock-ish, it was like, uh-oh, are we going to completely give back all these gains? But, I think the way today finished, it actually, did not do bad. Just a couple other names that I spotted that I thought were interesting. Grub also finished up today, 5.7%. I put on a very small trade in this one. I put on a call spread in Grub. Of the other semi names, but I like how Grub is turning the corner. NXPI is one of those names that closed lower than where it opened, but something I think to watch considering how coiled this is. So that's another one. I'll stick with if I'm in the semis, I'll look at Nvidia. It did okay today, up 4%, closed a little bit lower than the open, but if you were holding it into today, you probably had a decent day. Did I talk about Restoration Hardware? I'll talk about the two names that reported. Maybe we'll end here for the day. Yeah, really nice move. We played this one for earnings. I actually sold a put spread to collect premium, but big short interest in Restoration Hardware all the way up to one hit a high of 150. The other name that reported is Coop. I think that one's right around flat, although they did beat earnings just by a touch. But they're essentially flat after hours. So that's it. Again, I'm not going to super analyze today. The option activity was very quiet for the most part. There were some SPY calls. There were some BX calls that went up. Also a little bit of KKR calls that went up. There was a call spread on Boot Barn. But the chart for BX, I don't know. For some reason, it just didn't jump off the page at me. But look at the volume. So, perhaps maybe I'll look at it again tomorrow. Again, just didn't want to add a ton of trades. I've been doing very good P&L wise, just having a lighter book. It allows me just to kind of think about this market objectively. Keep in mind, I do manage a trading room all day long too, so it keeps me focused on looking at new trends. So, and that's what I do for members. I try to catch those new trends, just like utilities, which I think that are moving. A couple trades that other trades that I was talking about last week. I dumped out of my XLV today. I was just kind of happy with what I made in it. It's back to the 52-week high. Maybe I'm leaving a little bit on the table, but I'll revisit that. Could always get back into it. I'm still long a little bit of Pfizer. Pfizer made a 52-week high, but closed off of it. So still holding my last piece of Pfizer. So that's it for now. I'll leave it here. Have a great night, everybody, and we'll see you back tomorrow morning. Hope to see you in the trading room. We open that up every morning. We post a bunch of notes pre 9 a.m., but we open up the trading room at 9 o'clock, and we talk about strategy every morning and some of the biggest movers and biggest movers and some setups. We do that every morning pre-market starting at 9 o'clock. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the trading room.